Today is Monday the 2nd of March 2015. Right, so I was remarking to you that...
That's all, let me sit down to the eye line.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I was remarking that my mom and my grandmother... My mom's name was Francis Morean. She passed away last year, 26th of July. And my grandmother was Louisa Violet Morean. She passed away in 1971, Carnival Monday, 1971. But they grew up in Port of Spain, East River. Well, actually, they grew up in different parts. My grandmother was a housekeeper, cook, washer, maid, all this domestic help essentially. And she worked in Port of Spain from, I can't remember exactly what year, but my mom was about 2 years old. My mom was born in 1929, so that makes it about 1931, 1932.
Okay.
From about that age, my grandmother was living in Port of Spain. She lived in Woodbrook. Sometimes she resided where she worked. Sometimes she rented. I know she rented at Louis Street in Woodbrook, I think it's number 12 Louis Street. At one time, I have the address on the document. She rented there for a while. Came up some folks called Maroch and Paroch. I went to look for the house with my mom around 2008, but it looks different now from when she was a child, she said. She worked at St. Clair. She worked with a lot of Venezuelans as well, because she was very fluent in Spanish. That's my grandmother. Yeah, in fact she was multilingual. She was polyglot. She spoke French, Patois, English, Chinese. She spoke some African language. I don't know what it was Yoruba, but some African language. I mentioned Chinese. She spoke Castellano, or people would say Spanish in Trinidad.
Right.
She spoke Papiamento. She spoke English, of course. That's how many I mentioned there so far. She spoke Hindi.
And how did she become a polyglot?
Yeah, well, she lived in different communities at different times. You know, she grew up in Carpichima. For one, Carpichima at that time when her father mixed up, I suspect she learned the African language in Carpichima as a child. Well, she was born around 1884, and around that time you would have had Trinidad, I don't know how much you've read in terms of the works of Anthony de Vitale. Not Anthony. L.A.A. de Vitale, the guy who wrote Trinidad.
He has a book, History and the Good Martin,
no, that's Anthony. It's L.A.A. de Vitale. He's one of the ancestors of Anthony.
Okay.
He wrote a book in around 1854, 1858, the first edition came out. It was called Trinidad, a Geography, etc., etc. I can't remember the full title. But he spoke about the composition of the population at that time. And it's significant that around 1884, 1888, which is around the period my grandmother was growing up. There are many people newly arrived from India, Africa. There are people who at that time would have been first generation from Africa. Fairly newly arrived. The Africans are coming to Trinidad as late as the 1860s. So she grew up among people of Africa. Who would have come from Africa. She knew some, even in our own family, and that's my grandmother. And there were lots of Indians coming from India, the estates, Chinese, speaking Chinese.
Right.
So the society itself was a polyglot society. She grew up in that. She went to Venezuela as a child as well.
Right.
And she lived there for a couple of years. I don't know how many years she had to live in Venezuela. But she came back speaking Spanish. Right?
Okay. And did your mom pick up any of
Yeah, my mom spoke Spanish as well. In fact, my grandmother insisted that my mom learn Spanish.
Right.
And she spoke to her in Spanish quite a lot when she was a child. And she always used every opportunity she had to show my mom how learning Spanish and being able to speak Spanish was to her advantage. So, for example, as a housekeeper, she got lots of jobs with Venezuelans.
Yes, but she could communicate.
Yeah, and there were lots of Venezuelans in Trinidad at that time. In fact, the connections between Trinidad and Venezuela, what's happening now with all these people who are coming because of uprisings in Venezuela, it's nothing new.
It's nothing new.
It has been going on for, over 300 years.
We're closer to Venezuela than we are to Tobago. So.
Yeah, it's been on for many years. It's been going on even before people talk about people who run it. I've done a lot of interviews in Erin, Rancho Comado, that area. In fact, this stack here concerns Rancho.
Okay.
My Rancho interviews. But there are lots of people, family histories, they're running away from, everybody's running away from Simon Bolivar. Well, not necessarily from Bolivar, but running away during the wars. During the Bolivarian War. in the same way, everybody ancestors came on the Fatal Razak.
Yeah.
I mean, so many people I have interviewed, the grandparents came in 1880 or great grandparents came in 18 something from India, but they came on the Fatal Razak.
Yeah.
So they.
I mean, my grandfather was born down there.
Where?
In Venezuela.
Okay.
So I don't know the history.
Yeah.
But, you know,
but I'm just using the Bolivar,
Right.
Simon Bolivar as a landmark because for some reason, the same way people talk about the Fatal Razak as if you would think the whole of all the East Indians in Trinidad came on, the way some people speak, you think everybody, grandfather, great-grandmother, or somebody came on the Fatal Razak. It's just in their minds, the Fatal Razak is what they identify with.
Absolutely. And because there's so little research and even curiosity is a kind of cop-out. It's easy to
Well, I wouldn't say there isn't. I mean, people are doing research, but it's the easy point.
On a
If you
large
don't know,
scale, and if you don't know, it's easy to say, oh, well, somebody in my class came on the Fatal Razak or was, you know.
So there are many different uprisings and different wars ending in Venezuela, but Simon Bolivar is the landmark. So, right. But the thing is, coming back to my grandmother, there were lots of Venezuelans in Port of Spain. And she being fluent in Spanish was able to get a lot of jobs, work with them. To the extent that when my mom was about 2 or 3 years old, maybe about 4 years old, my grandmother was invited to take her to Venezuela with her to work with a family in Venezuela so that their child, I remember the child's name was Graciela, my mom always talked about Graciela, so that Graciela could learn to speak English from my mom. I thought, she'd have my mom's company.
Right.
Yeah. So, but the point I wanted to make was, all the Spanish aside, is that Port of Spain was much different, East River was much different in those days to what it is today.
Certainly.
Yeah, and one of the projects I'm working on, I'm actually doing a reconstruction of David Street in particular. David Street is the area where my grandmother and my mom lived the longest in Port of Spain. And my mom, for example, would talk about playing in the yard, playing in the road in the night. Just up to 1940, she left in 1943. Up to that time, they were playing in the yard, in the road. There was a sapodilla tree across the road from where they lived. And the sapodilla tree, when the bats pass, and the bats would try to pick the sapodillas. And as the sapodillas fall, they run across and pick them up and so on, The tree is still there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where is David Street in relation to like St. Paul and
Okay, David Street is off. If you come up Oxford Street, from Oxford Street side, you can access David Street. If you go to the top of the very end of Oxford Street, you can make a right turn. I think it's onto Montague Street, and then from Montague Street you make a left turn onto David Street. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm thinking it's Montague Street. If it's not Montague, it's Plastic Street. But it's not. David Street is close to. David Street is like on the border between Laventille, Gonzales.
All right.
From David Street, you can walk to the end of David Street and swing down to Belmont, Belmont Circular Road.
Okay.
Well, not Circular Road. The road with the Hermitage Road. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Hermitage or Gloucester Lodge?
Well, both, because Hermitage and Gloucester Lodge are parallel to each other.
Okay.
So from David Street, you could walk down. There is, I can't remember all the names right now offhand, but if you go to the end of David Street, you would come out on the top, pretty close to the top of. Pretty close to Hermitage Road in any case.
Alright.
And pretty close to Gloucester Lodge Road and something terrace, Tornell Terrace. It's a Tornell Terrace that takes you from. Tornell Terrace is one of the roads that lead you from David Street down to Gloucester Lodge Road.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So no, that was my mother's playground as a child. But the point I'm trying to make it was a different environment at the time. David Street in particular had lots of Bajans and lots of people who had gone to the Panama Canal to work during that period when the canal was being constructed. So it was a very interesting street. I really got curious when I began to discover how many foreign, people moving from other communities and living there. There were East Indians from Grenada who were living on that street. My grandmother was actually renting from a lady called Miss Lovey, who was East Indian. It was a big East Indian family living on that street. So I got curious about David Street while interviewing my mom about her childhood. And I had so much information that I decided that Initially I was trying to compile the life story of my mom and sister's brother, and she had one brother, and my grandmother. But I had so much information about certain areas that I had to kind of excise it and look at it as a separate project. So David Street, I have like a large number of manuscripts, and I'm calling this manuscript David Street 1943. So I'm trying to capture what it was like at the point when my mom left David Street to go to Palo Seco to live. That's where I grew up.
In Palo Seco?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why you're interested in that area?
Oh, well actually, yes and no. Yes, indeed. But I'm interested in a large number of other communities as well. It's just how things have evolved. Yes, it's just how things have evolved.
But tell me about you. I want to hear about, let's start with Francis.
Well, to start with Francis, you still have to understand the life of my ancestors.
Absolutely.
To get a sense of where I was born, how I happened to, be in that community and all of that. So I want to talk more about my mom, and I wanted to make a point about some points about David Street that connects with my life.
Okay, sure.
Now, David Street was a peaceful area, playing in the night, midnight, and all of that. You look at David Street now. I mean, it's amazing difference. I was there a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago. I try to go there as often as I can to interview people, but sometimes it's challenging. I remember one occasion we went and we parked, and there were these drug pushers on the street, and they were monitoring us. They gave us an escort out and an escort in. They didn't tell us they were drug pushers. We know they were drug pushers, and they did it very courteously, but they were warning us to be cautious on the street.
Yeah.
But as if they were just concerned about us, but they were just really more concerned that
kind of tooth.
Yeah, that we were in the tooth, and we didn't know. They didn't know who we were, but they knew the lady I went to see. And I told them, so that was cool for them. And yeah, there's only one period when I saw David Street quiet in the last couple of years, and that has been when Jack Warner was the minister. I don't know what happened, but David Street was extremely. You kind of walked along the street and take photographs even. Okay, so one of the interesting things about my mom growing up in David Street was that this East End family used a lot of turmeric. They made curry actually. They sold, in fact, there's an old lady in the household who made curry, and so they sold curry. Wet curry, not dry curry. She would make it on the spot. And my grandmother had a love for curry and a love for turmeric. And she valued it as a medicine as well. She also had the idea that my grandmother would cook and not put turmeric in the food. So that just one of the little connections in terms of, I use a lot of turmeric in my products. For years I've been preaching to people about the value of turmeric.
And it's good for inflammation.
It's good for many. It's one of the cheapest herbs to produce, easy herbs to cultivate, and it's one of the most beneficial herbs you can find on the face of the earth, and we take it for granted.
Yeah.
So in a sense, I could link a lot of the different things to my experiences and my use of turmeric to my grandmother's growing up in Port of Spain. Right. In 1943, on Good Friday 1943, my grandmother's mother passed away. Her name was Margaret Britton. And in fact, one of the manuscript I'm writing about my grandmother's life and so on, it actually begins on that day. Because it's a journey they were making early in the morning. They had to catch the first train from Port of Spain to go down to Palo Seco. And it was Good Friday as well. Good Friday ties into La Divina Pastora and all the festivities in Siparia. Plus I had an aunt, my grandmother and a sister living in Siparia. So I was able to use Good Friday to link those episodes and to actually describe their journey, walking down from David Street, coming down Port of Spain, what they were witnessing, and coming down on the train and what was happening along the train line, and paint a picture of Trinidad along different points on that day. So my grandmother passed away, my great-grandmother passed away soon after they got to Palo Seco.
So she was able to make the trip.
Yeah, they died. She died a short while after they got there. And what transpired was that she lived alone, and she had lands down. She had 2 acres of land down there and a house. My grandmother was living in Port of Spain, but she was renting in Port of Spain. So she had to make a choice. Should she stay in Port of Spain and work, or should she go and live on the lands that her mother had left for her? So she chose to go to Palo Seco to live. At that time, Palo Seco, the oil fields were very big in Palo Seco. TPD was the main company in those days. There's a place called Beach Camp in Palo Seco. That was the residential camp for the expats, and it was opening up. So there were lots of opportunities for her as a housekeeper. And the pay was better than in Port of Spain in any instance. It was the middle of the war days. Things were hard in Port of Spain. Things were never hard for her during the war days in Port of Spain, personally, because people liked her a lot from, what I gathered. And she did a lot of work for the soldiers. She would do laundry for the soldiers. And what I was told is that, like, when they sent the laundry for her, they would send a lot of food stuff in the boxes with the laundry for her. So she always had food stuff. That's one thing about her. She always had it, and she always shared what she had with others. But when my great grandmother died, she decided in May, she decided she would go to Palo Seco to live. And that meant the end of my mother's schooling in Port of Spain, and less opportunities for my mom as well, because the opportunities she had in Port of Spain, when she was in Port of Spain, she had classmates or friends in school, like Ruby Felix, for example, who was a monitor, I think, at the time. Ruby Felix went on to be one of the PNM senators in the early days. And my mom was very bright as well. Going down in the country to live changed all of that. And pretty soon after going down there to live, she was probably 13 when she went down there to live. 13 going on 14. Yeah, she had been 14. Her 14th birthday would have been celebrated that year, that 1943. And then a couple of years after, she had her first child. And you know what happens in the countryside when a woman has that one child, and then not too long after, another child. And I was the seventh of her 9 children.
Okay.
I was born in April 1961. Right, so we can pause. Okay, I don't know where the Francis bit came from, but my grandfather, his name was Francis Morean, and that's where the Morean bit came in. My grandmother married to him at Cochrane Roman Catholic Church. I have I got the marriage certificate recently. What year she was married, Lord? She was married to him around 1929 or 1927, if I recall correctly, somewhere in that period. Because my mom was born in 1929. They were already married when my mom was born. So it must have been around 1927, somewhere within that period. Anyhow, the marriage didn't last very long. They had 2 children together, or maybe 3. They may have had 3 children together. I think one may have died. I found a birth. My mom, I should say this, my grandmother had 11 births altogether. 4 of her children survived.
Wow.
She lost quite a few of the others. I mean, well, she lost 7 others, either during the pregnancy or during childbirth, or maybe they didn't survive very long. Maybe, I don't know how long, but not very long. Maybe not even as much as a year. And this brings me back to why I chose that journey to Palo Seco on Good Friday to start my manuscript about my grandmother's life. Because her first child to survive was an aunt I had called Utilda. And my grandmother at that time, she was Roman Catholic for most of her life. She became an Adventist while she lived in Palo Seco. And that was during World War II. She became an Adventist. I'll tell you a bit about that transition. But she was Roman Catholic all along. And when she lived in Cyprus at some parts of her life as well, my grandmother, sorry. And she believed in La Divina Pastora. So that's why I tied in the Good Friday bit, so I could paint a story about La Divina Pastora and that whole tradition. And when her first child, she had created La Divina Pastora as well, actually. So when her first child was born, I was Utilda, the first child to live, which was Utilda Samuel. Well, no, Samuel is a married name. Her name by marriage. She was Utilda Elsion Richards. My grandmother's maiden name was Richard. Either Richard or Richards. I'm not quite sure which one, because I've seen different documents. Okay, but when that child was born, Utilda Elsion Richards was born, she dedicated that child to La Divina Pastora. So my aunt grew up saying that she's La Divine Child. She always said I'm La Divine Child, right? Because my grandmother had prayed for a child to live, you know. So
what number should have been?
Utilda?
Yeah.
I don't know which one she would have been, but I know all told, she had 11 births, or 11 pregnancies in any case. And only 4 of the children, only 4 survived. I don't know which one Utilda was.
I mean, it's fascinating considering what you do now.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's good to know these things because sometimes within a family you may have diseases or medical conditions which may be genetic. But my mom never had that problem, and my sisters, I have 3 sisters, and you know, 2 of my sisters have children, 1 doesn't. In terms of my grandmother, she had 2 sisters, 1 didn't have any children, right? She had 2 sisters that I knew of, I should say.
Right.
Maybe there might have been more, because when I've been doing research, I've been picking up odd bits of information that I haven't been able to establish. Okay. But La Divina Pastora was close, near and dear to my grandmother, and to her daughter Utilda. My great grandmother, unlike my grandmother, my great grandmother was a devout Anglican actually. Yeah, but although she was an Anglican, she married. Or at least I'm not sure if they were actually married, but actually her common law husband, or if they were not married, his name was either Jack Richard or Richard Jack. I'm not sure again, because my grandmother carried Richard, but she had a sister called Martha. Martha carried Jack.
Okay.
So
I mean, I know in those days a lot of people they just, even though you weren't married, they carry the name of whoever it might have been.
Yeah, it still happens. But the thing is, one child carried the father's first name, and one child carried the father's surname. And probably had to do with who went to register the child.
Right.
You know, because sometimes they may call a man Mr. Jack.
True, and that's his first
name.
name.
Or Mr. So I've been trying to find the documents concerning that Jack Richards. I haven't been able to trace it. But it seems to me that Jack Richards' connection came either from Sierra Leone as freed Africans, what they call liberated Africans or liberated slaves. There were a number of people who...
Would that be the American?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm still trying to find the actual documentation. But it's either... The Americans are different. The Americans came around 1812.
1812,
right.
After the 1812 war.
But there were lots of other freed Africans who came under different circumstances. And remember slavery, the trade in slaves had been abolished by the British in 1807, right? And I shouldn't say slaves, because they weren't really slaves. I mean, they were enslaved. But the trade in enslaved Africans ended around 1807. And between 1807 and the actual end of slavery, British ships were capturing, attacking the Dutch and other traders who were still engaged in slavery. So, whatever the case, I believe that my great-grandfather, which would have been Richard Jack or Jack Richard, or Richards as the case may be, I believe that his parents and quite a few of his other family members came either from, as liberated Africans, from those ships, or came from North America.
Okay.
Right? One of my ancestors was called Cyril Congo, for example. You know, there are lots of people who call Jack Congo and Yoruba John and names like those during that period, 1850, 1860. You see lots of records in the archives of names like those, which was really a connotation that they were African. You know, they were African from Africa.
Right.
As
to
distinct.
make a distinction.
Yeah, so they call them Congo to distinguish them, you know. So I suspect that I may have some Congo blood. You know,
okay.
It's an area I'm still researching. I went to Sierra Leone in 2010 to do some research, and I want to return sometime to do some more history on that, you know.
Okay.
I want to go to South Carolina as well, because you know, sometimes you just have to follow your instinct when you're researching, you know. And I have a feeling that some of my ancestors may have some connection to
South Carolina.
Maybe on that same Jack Richards bit. But I'm dancing around. I'm digressing. Let me get back to
That's okay. That's fine.
let me get back to my grandmother and Palo Seco. My mom. I was talking about my grandmother's life. My great grandmother, which was Margaret Richards. Margaret Richards? No.
Britton.
Margaret Britton. Oh, you're on top of things as well. Margaret Britton. She was a midwife,
Okay.
right? In fact, she delivered my grandmother's, at least two of my grandmother's children. Right? She lived in Santa Flora at first. There was an estate by the name of. Oh, there's an area in Santa Flora called Waddell Village. My God. Romano Estate. I think it's Romano Estate. I could be wrong, so I will just put on record that I'm not sure. But I think it was Romano Estate. The name may come to mind as I go on. The thing is, it's not a name that was used much. Most people don't even know that estate had that name in those days. But that area is called Waddell Village today. The oil companies took over those lands, and they developed housing for the workers and so on. And some people bought private lands, plots as well. But that estate, my God, I can't believe I actually forget the name of that estate. But it must be Romano. Could only be Romano's estate. Let me just mark that. So I don't forget.
Take a note.
Yeah, I'll have to check my notes, but I think it's Romano Estate. So my grandmother's mother worked on that estate, whatever the name was. And she had what I call a contract, cocoa contract. I don't know if you're familiar with the system in the old days where people would work on an estate. Somebody would own the lands, but you would control a block, 2 acres, 10 acres, as the case, whatever you can manage. And you would plant young cocoa trees. It was a system regulated by law. There was an act of the Legislative Council that regulated the process. Although sometimes the owners of the land sometimes took advantage of the
Would that have been kind of under the Cabildo at the time?
No, this is like
This is in the 40s?
1920s, 1930s. It's still on the statutes. You could still do it.
Okay.
You can still contract your land to people, but no, I don't know if anybody does it still.
Yeah, well, people, it would be hard to get.
Well, the system has changed. The system has changed, Let me say the society has changed, I should say.
People not as honest as well as they used to be. So people might put up a big house.
Well, you could deal with that. I mean, you have to know how to deal with these things. But the thing, though, it was mainly for cocoa. It was mainly used for cocoa.
Cocoa production.
Cocoa production. Right? Cocoa was the main crop. So you're planting the cocoa trees, the young plants. When you just like close to bearing or bearing stage, you give the lands up to the owner. And the contract between you and the owner of the land would tell you what you could or cannot do. There are certain things, like some people plant certain crops between them. Some planters didn't want those crops planted, like Tanya, Dashin, bananas, and so on. The contracts varied, but there was a template, a basic template which they worked with. So my great grandmother had one of those contracts, and the monies that she got, she used those monies to buy 2 acres of land in Palo Seco. Not just Palo Seco, but a new part of the village that was developing called Palo Seco New Settlement. Now, I should digress a bit to talk about Palo Seco New Settlement. Up to about 1923, 24, 26, most of the people who were living in Palo Seco were private landowners. The majority of them also planted cocoa. There's an area of Palo Seco called Las Charo, for example, which was a big cocoa area. In fact, they used to call it the cocoa. When you leave the village, the main road, there's a road taking you to Las Charo. From Las Charo, you could go through the bush. Further down, you could go down to Carapala. Well, Rancho Comado first, then to Carapala, and then you could go all the way to Erin, through the bush. So there was so much cocoa in there that they call in there the cocoa. Right? This was Las Charos, the name of that area. Las Charos, either Spanish or Amerindian, meaning lots of small streams. And that area had lots of small streams indeed. So my Palo Seco up to then, as I said, was agricultural, but with the discovery of oil by TPD, that changed the whole dynamic of that community. And the oil companies now began to try to buy up people's lands.
Right.
and foolish people,
Not knowing better.
not knowing better. I shouldn't call them foolish. That's the wrong word. Not understanding the economics of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes very often they sold their lands to the oil companies. Some of them didn't do that, but in any case, the oil companies tried their best to. And the companies, there were several companies in those days. There were lots of small oil companies, and the oil companies were competing with each other. So the prices of the land was going up because each company is trying to outbid the other companies in offering people the prices of their lands. So TPD ended up taking over a lot of those lands. Right?
TPD was
Trinidad Petroleum Development Company Limited.
Okay.
TPD gave way to BP, and then BP gave way to Tisero. Right. So TPD took over most of those lands, and there's a company today, a state-owned company called Palaseco Agricultural Enterprises Limited, that evolved out of the agricultural lands that were owned by Tisero.
Right.
When Tisero became a state fully.
But they must have some interesting archives themselves.
Well, yes, I would love to be honest with you. I would love, and I worked in TPD for a year. I mean, I worked in Tisero for a year, but at the time when I worked in Tisero, I didn't have the interest which I have now in history, because they have what I call well files, and the very well files themselves are loaded with historical information.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they give you dates as to when the lands were drilled. And who the engineers were, who the drillers were. I mean, there's loads and loads, if there was an oil spill, I mean, like there's certain wells which erupted over the years. Like there's a well called 40. There's a part of Palaseco called 40. Some of these names over the years would disappear.
They're going to be lost.
Yeah, because the tradition of, how they became popular and how important they were has diminished. But 40, this area called 40, was an area where Palaseco well 40 erupted.
Okay.
Violently erupted.
You remember the year?
No, I was before my.
Okay.
I just grew up. When I was a little boy, it was already.
story.
No, I never heard the story.
Okay.
I never heard the story until I became. I only discovered some of those stories around 2000, 2003, when I began to do history of the village, and I was able to connect the dots. So it was really Palaseco well 40 that had erupted. And there's a well in Erin called Erin 33. I remember when that well erupted, I was working in the oil company at that time, I think. So the area was known as 40. And all that area had a lot of old cocoa estates. I remember as a boy, my father worked with, my father's name was Leo Telesford. We didn't grow up in the same household, but he worked with Texaco. And one of the precursor companies to Texaco was a company called STOL, which is Superior Trinidad Oilfields Limited. And there was another company called VCOL, Venezuela Consolidated Oilfields Limited. VCOL and STOL were closely allied companies.
Okay.
I think they may have evolved, STOL may have evolved out of VCOL, if my memory serves me right. So my father worked at Texaco, and Texaco controlled STOL. Nobody said STOL. In growing up, it was STOL. STOL.
STOL.
Yeah, you hear in this place called STOL. STOL.
Okay, so it was really STOL.
It was STOL.
Corrupted into STOL.
Yeah, STOL. Right, so my father had gardens. He had lots of, my father loved gardening.
Okay.
He had these big gardens, big bunches of plantain and bananas, pawpaw rotting fruit. My father loved gardening. I mean, to the extent that anywhere he worked, he planted. Let's say he worked in a well. Because he worked different parts of the oilfields, wherever Texaco had wells and they would move around. Wherever they had a well, he worked. Once the well was there for more than a week or two,
he planted something.
he would clean a little piece of land and start planting a garden, and sometimes he'd maintain it, So as a little boy, I remember we used to pass through 40 to go to Estival, to his garden on weekends to collect provisions and so on, How I reached there? I'm just rambling on, it seems.
That's alright, none of us.
Oh, no, not what I was talking about. I was talking about my great grandmother. That's a Ramadan, but I was talking about my great grandmother and the cocoa contracts. Okay, so Palaseco up to 1926, I was saying, had all these people with freehold lands and they were planting cocoa. But then when the oil companies came and the oil companies began to take over the lands, so what the British colonial government did was to create a new community that they call a Palo Seco New Settlement. And that was lands they had like 1 acre plots. Some areas had 1 acre plots. Some areas had like 2 acre plots. The next time we're doing any recording, we'll have to do it at home. So I can actually show you some of these documents.
Sure.
I don't really keep my manuscripts here.
Okay.
So they had these. I have a map of what the plans that the British had for the community. The interesting thing, though, one of the interesting things I find about that settlement is that there was a lot of people came from all over Trinidad to live in that area, and it was a kind of vibrancy, it was one of the, I think, apart from Siparia, where lands were laid out, Siparia was laid out as a village. Not many areas of Trinidad were actually laid out as villages, You know, that I think of it.
Everything just kind of evolved.
Yeah, out of slavery days and out of indentureship, most of the places evolved. But to me, Palo Seco, I know Siparia was planned.
Right. Is that because of the oil companies, the presence of the oil?
Well, I'm only now reflecting on this. There were certain areas that were planned, like there's a place in San Diego called Brooklyn. I'll need to pause.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are you talking about?
You started to tell me about you're continuing to talk about the new settlement and how the villages.
Oh, right, yes. I was saying, from my knowledge of the history of Trinidad, there are not many settlements that were actually planned out in any kind of structured manner. Right? And I'm saying Siparia was, to some extent, Siparia was a village that was laid out. The new Siparia, when I say new Siparia, the framework of streets, the main the town center, those were laid out by the British, right? And they have all kind of Queen this and all the names after British royalty, Mary Street and Queen Street and this street and that, Edward Street and so on. And I'm saying that, like during World War II, there were certain communities that where allotments were given out, and in some cases houses were given out with the allotments for farming, right? Like in Delaford, for example, there's an area in Delaford called Delaford Land Settlement. There's an area in Brooklyn called Brooklyn Settlement, that's in Sandy Grande. And those were established for food production, mainly during World War II. But I can't think of anywhere really. Morning! Good morning! Good morning. Okay, can I have a seat? I'll see you in a while, please. Yeah.
Alright, I don't want to keep it too much longer.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll not have this distractions. I think I have to, Okay, so let me just continue concerning. I can close off on this bit concerning Palo Seco New Settlement and my great grandmother. So Palo Seco New Settlement, on the development plan they had, they actually had lands allocated for churches, post office, burial ground. I can't remember all the details now, but lands were actually, streets were planned in different areas. Some areas were for housing, some areas were like 1 acre plots, some areas were for 2 acre plots. So my great grandmother had purchased this piece for 2 acres, right? And she lived initially she had one of her sons. That was one of my great uncles called Layo Brito, which is interesting because she carried Britain, but he carried Brito. So I don't know how these things happen sometimes, but it's the same family, but spellings change along the way. And
Brito might have been a nickname for Britain.
Quite possible. It's just Britain. Or the person how the person pronounced it, who went to register the child and all these things. Okay, so he grew up with her. He was the one closest to her, right? Because my grandmother's other sister was in Siparia and my grandmother's in Port of Spain. My grandmother lived down here, Siparia, for a while as well, as I said. So when she died, she gave the lands. She left the lands to my grandmother, and they came down here to live. And then my mom came down, of course, with my grandmother.
Okay.
And her life changed, and then I was born in 1961.
And all right, so tell me about your earliest memories of your grandmother.
Yeah, well, the bush, for one, she loved making medicine. She bought a lot of herbs. She used to carry me to help her collect the herbs, you know, sometimes. At an early age, she had me going to collect them for her as well whenever she needed herbs for somebody. She had lots of herbs around the yard. She had a lot of friends who were elders in the village. They would come by us. We used to plant rice. She used to plant rice, hill rice. That was a big tradition in our family. And so, like when the rice was harvested, a lot of the older men in the village, I could just mention some names, just, you know, for the record, like there's a guy called Mr. Sefi, there's a guy called Mr. Bobot, you know. These guys, when they would come and help her pound the rice. And when she finished pounding the rice, she would bag it off. We'd keep it for ourselves, you know, we would store it. She had a way of, she would store it. Okay. Yeah, we planted the rice, and when they finished pounding the rice, she would keep some. She wouldn't pound all. She would keep some for seed for the next year, and whatever was pound, whatever they would bag them off. She would keep them like in flour bags, the cloth bags, long ago, and then she would store them in a box. So then she would store it in a wooden box. And then she would store it without pounding it. And when she needs, she would take it and pound. But whenever she was pounding rice, when she was finished, she would bag it off. And like she was going to Port of Spain, because she had lots of friends in Port of Spain. She would carry a bag for all her friends, you know.
So why would she pound the rice?
To take off the husk.
To take it off. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that was the method.
Yeah, mortar and pestle, right?
Okay.
They said the system we used was just one mortar and one pestle. But in some parts, like in Maroc, there's a place called Maroc, they use two.
That's down
yeah.
Right.
They use two pestles. Two people do it at the same time.
Okay.
I never knew that was done in Trinidad. I only discovered that about 2 years ago. But I saw them doing that in Africa, in Sierra Leone, with the two pestles. I have a piece of batik I brought back with it actually.
Two people doing it.
Yeah, two people. So one is going up, one is going down, and they keep going. It's a faster way. Yeah. So that was one of my, you know, that's one of my fondest memories of my grandmother actually. The pounding rice, you know, I used to really enjoy that. When the rice is finished, pound it hot, you know, and that rice tasted real good. She was a praying woman. The fact that I'm alive, I probably have to thank God for her as well, because when I was young, there's a time I ate a whole lot of salt. You know, 2 pounds of salt or more. She had a jar, I used to call it salt butter, the salt. And I was 4 years old at the time. I ate all the salt. And she gave me sweet oil to drink, and she prayed and she prayed and she prayed, and I survived.
Why did you eat all that?
I don't know. I guess a child and just, I don't know, you know, trying to...
It just tastes good.
The taste must have appealed to me. She was an Adventist, so I didn't...
You told me that, but you didn't tell me the story around her conversion.
During World War II, when the Pope blessed the arms, when, you know, she always spoke of Abyssinia, you know, in terms of Africa as Abyssinia.
Right.
And when the Abyssinian War broke out with Mussolini, she couldn't understand how the Pope could support that. Yeah. And how the Pope could bless the arms. And she decided that she couldn't be part of a religion
like doing that.
That could do such. I mean, it's not the first time that the Pope blessed.
Axis of evil.
Yeah. So she decided she leave with the Roman Catholic Church. And around that same time, there was an Adventist movement that was growing in Palo-Seco. There was a woman called Victoria Sarah Bourne. Victoria Sarah Bourne was from Tobago initially. That was a big family in the village, in Palo-Seco New Settlement. Okay. And there's another family called the Figaro family. There's a lady called Doris. Well, she had a daughter called Doris Figaro. Remind me when you go down south to try to interview Doris Figaro and put her on record. Okay. Very knowledgeable woman. But Doris's mother was an Adventist as well, a strong member of the Adventist church as well. So my grandmother converted to the Adventist church sometime around. I have a baptism certificate. I will tag it to you on Facebook.
Okay.
I have a baptism photograph, sorry. I have the certificate as well, but I have a photograph on Facebook.
Okay.
When she was baptized. So at that point she decided, she changed to the Adventist church. So I grew up in a household that was strongly influenced by the Adventist church.
Right.
I went to the Adventist church when I was a young boy as well, but my mom wasn't Adventist.
Okay.
And just about 2 years ago, I reflected that although my grandmother was an Adventist, she wasn't very dogmatic about certain things. Like she never tried to dictate that my mom be an Adventist as well and all of these things. She
did she observe the Sabbath strictly or?
No, I'm saying, so my mom cooked and she did her laundry on a Sunday, a Saturday.
That's also about to us. There's a kind of, you find maybe unintended syncretism when people convert, so they keep elements without even realizing.
Well, they do. There were definitely certain old traditions that from hindsight, so as an adult, I began to reflect. My grandmother was Adventist and she was very devout. In fact, the book I'm writing about her life is called "The Woman Who Boiled the Bible and Drank the Water."
Okay.
Because she was so talented. If she goes to church and the preacher just starts to quote from the Bible, she could tell you exactly which verse, which chapter.
That he's coming.
She was. Or you could just name a verse and chapter and she will tell you what it is. She was really, 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 really talented and she knew the Bible inside out. But the interesting thing is, in spite of that, there was syncretization in her life. And there were little traditions that passed on, I suspect, from her African ancestors that she still honored.
Because to give that up would be to kind of give up her essence.
Well, I don't know. It's difficult to speak for somebody who gone there and gone, how she related to it. But I think the reality is that the two worlds lived comfortably with each other.
Right.
But the more important point I wanted to make was that she never dictated to my mom when it came to the Sabbath. So my mom would, there's a verse in the scripture in terms of keeping the Sabbath. It doesn't just apply to you, but to you and your man folk and your woman folk and your animals and this and your that. You've been Adventist or what?
No, I have a close relative who's Adventist and because I'm Catholic, so we kind of
compare notes.
We debate. It's not argue, but we debate things, because of course, the Adventist is kind of Old Testament God, and there's, for our beliefs.
Right.
I give you a new commandment, to love one another, and not that it erases all of that.
Yeah.
But,
I know the whole debate,
exactly,
the whole dialogue.
So we kind of go at it from time to time.
Yeah, but my grandmother, we never cooked pork in the house. It was a sort of amalgam of different things, So certain Adventist things were quite. I never ate pork as a child. Ham and these things were not cooked in the house.
Right.
Shellfish, crabs and all these things were never cooked in our house.
So you don't eat anything like that?
Actually, I'm allergic to those things.
Okay.
Interestingly enough.
Right. Well, I don't eat meat, but I do eat seafood.
I can't think of all the things now, but a lot of things that our diet, our lifestyle, in terms of food styles, were essentially Adventist.
And no alcohol, of course.
Well, there was alcohol for Christmas in the house of Christmas.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that used to happen when my grandmother was alive, but as a child growing up, I remember alcohol in any instance when I was old enough to remember alcohol, right? Ellen G's White Counsels and Diets and Health was one of my grandmother's favorite books. The Great Controversy, she loved those books, and in some respects we look like an Adventist, except for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was never that rigid. The way it was in some households where the head was an Adventist.
Okay.
Some Adventists were very, very dogmatic about the Sabbath.
Yeah.
There were lots of elders in the village as well who knew a lot about herbal medicines. There's a lady called Ma Pedro. Her husband was Mr. Pedro.
Right.
They knew about the herbs. They knew about the prayers and things in Spanish. They had a lot of herbs growing in their yard that came from Venezuela. So I grew up in an environment where there were quite a few healers. There was a guy called Sidney Ballier. He's a quack. They call cracking? Well, it's a system with it's a system of manipulation essentially.
Okay.
Right.
Like, oh, you mean that's like Nara?
All those things. He treated all those things.
Okay.
Right.
But when did you first know that this is what you wanted?
When I was about 16 or 17, actually, I began to know two things. I began to know clearly that this is what I wanted to do. In some way, not that I wanted to do it. I wouldn't say I wanted to do it. At that point, I wasn't visualizing myself as a healer. But two things became very clear to me when I was between 16, 17. By the time I was 18, one of the things that was very clear to me is that my life's work was in Trinidad. Right. I knew I didn't have to go away. Going away to study and going away to work and live and all that was not part of my life's calling. I knew that quite clearly when I was about 18. I was working in the oil company at that time, and I remember saying that. And when I was around 17, 18, 19, I became more and more interested in documenting herbal medicines. And I also became involved with, I developed a friendship around the age of 18 or 19. Just after I left finished A-levels, my very first job after A-levels was with the cadets. The cadets usually have vacation camp in those days every year. And I worked as a laborer in the camp. And the camp was based at Shagamas Youth Camp. And I met a gentleman there called Adrian Laptis. He passed away the week after the elections of 2002. And he had a great interest in herbal medicines and beekeeping and other things and horticulture and so on. And our friendship began then. And he had a great influence. He always encouraged me to document. You know, and I would say it started with him. That when I began to actually document. Right. He was the influence. Okay. You know. And then as I went along, some of the elders who I interviewed began to encourage me. Not just encourage me, but began to chide me. I remember there's a lady called Ma Becky, for example. She's still on Charlotte Street. I have some of these ladies on video. Okay. Ma Becky, there's a lady called Morella Montano. You probably she's a minstrel player. Yes. Champion minstrel player. She died in 2002. Okay. Or 2001. 2001. She died in 2001. Okay. Yeah, she died around 2001. Right. I remember when she died, I did.
But I mean, she played minstrel right
up to the end. Right to the end. Right to the end.
NCBA judge in 2000.
Okay.
So I remember her on stage.
Yeah, she played right to the end. Yeah.
And then I left in 2000.
But she wasn't sickly. She was sprightly up to the end. You know, I mean, she just fell ill for a few months before she passed away. Right. I have some videos with her as well. Okay. All the awards and trophies at home and all that. So Morella and Ma Becky, and there's a lady called Ma Basso. Those three women were the ones who really pushed me into making medicines and selling medicines.
Right. And what about the men? What about male healers?
Well, yeah, I mean there were many as well. Right. But I'm saying in terms of the people who influenced me
directly
to make medicines, they were the ones who used to correlate me. Okay. Boy, you start all this information you're gathering, all this notes you're taking. What you're doing with it. You know, go and boil some medicine for people to drink. Go and make medicine and sell. You know, they were the ones who, those three ladies. Okay. Especially Ma Becky. Okay. You know,
where was she based?
Ma Becky was from Parliament.
Oh, okay.
Morella was from St. Anne's, high up in the hills in St. Anne's. Talking stupidness. Ma Basso, Imelda Basso, she was from high up in St. Anne's. Okay. Morella was from Maraval itself, just close to where she lived up the hillside from where you get the jeeps to go up to Parliament.
Yeah. Okay. That's kind of the entrance.
Yeah, she lived. Yeah, right in that area there.
I mean, I wonder what her family would have done with her things.
I don't know. I knew her son. No, I knew her Rupa. She had a son-in-law called Rupa. I knew Mr. Rupa and his wife. Right? They had gone abroad to live before she passed away. Because she was living alone when she passed away. I don't know what became of. And I never went to the house after that. And it'd be interesting to find out. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is part of the work we are trying to do to arrest those situations where people who live alone or they don't have Or people, even if they're living with somebody, they may not have the interest. And
Very often they don't. Very often they don't have the interest. Or they may have the interest in a very vague...
Yeah, superficial kind of way.
Yeah,
they think
kind of,
it's important.
Yes, but they never... Yeah, I can give many examples like those.
And they might think it's something they could exploit for themselves, and not see it as something that's valuable.
It's very, the responses vary. Some people just don't care. Some people don't want to...
They deal with a grief by just...
Some people as well don't want to hear about the past.
Absolutely.
For all sorts of psychological reasons. Some people have things in their past that they don't want to be recorded.
They don't want to come out.
And all of that. So it's some things I have to be very careful when I'm out there doing interviews. I have interviews I've done with elders, and some of the information I have, I'm not even sure I should publish it. Because it's so...
It's inflammatory. To whom? So at this point.
Well, sometimes it varies. I'll just give an example. There's an elder I interviewed in Palo Seco. She passed away a few years ago. She lived alone, and she had a horrible childhood. Both herself and her sisters, they had a horrible childhood. I'll give you an example of something she told me. She worked on this estate as a child. She wasn't 15 yet. And if people had turkeys, I think it was turkeys they used to mind. And she used to and they had Japanese, they used to feed the Japanese to the turkeys, so the young Japs. Apparently there's some chemicals in that helps the turkeys to grow faster.
Okay.
And she's a little girl, had to check down these things.
Oh my God.
And avoid getting stung at the same time. And she had to watch the owner, the man had all these khaki clothes, long time the estate owner wearing no kind of khaki clothes. She had to wash the khaki clothes. They used to beat her. And it was horrible, so horrible to the extent that, she didn't go to school, she didn't go to church, I think of the sort. But she used to hear about God. And she told me one day, she said, she looked up in the sky and she said, God, I hear you up there. Not these exact words, but essentially she was praying and she was saying, like, she hear that you're up there. If you are up there and all these things I hear about you, get me out of this place. And soon after, something actually happened. And she was able to escape. But the escape just took her another piece of torture.
Oh my gosh.
But she got out, what she prayed for at least, But it was such a horrible story, hearing what she went through. That, I know one of her daughters is a school teacher, was a headmistress as well. And I don't know how comfortable she would feel, but...
Well, it's having those conversations is important as well, right? Establishing people's comfort level and...
But the thing is, I'm not sure if I should... Okay, here what happens, right? When I face a situation, because it's a question of ethics and how you deal with it.
Absolutely.
My basic feeling is that if I go to approach her, she may not want it published.
Okay.
But at the same time, I think it's important information that people need to know.
It's part of the story of us.
So, I think in that particular circumstance, I may just go ahead and publish and face the consequence.
Right. Or, you could even change your name.
No, I don't change names.
Don't change your
name. I'm not writing a novel.
To protect.
No, I'm not writing a novel. Because if I change the name, then it loses the essence of who.
I'm just trying to find a happy medium between.
I think in that situation, it's not as if I'm not saying anything bad. It is just that it's just all it says really is that
it's recorded history.
My ancestor had a horrible, difficult childhood.
Yeah.
And I think down the road, somebody might be feel proud to know that my ancestor had a difficult childhood, and we have overcome that. We know
better.
Yeah. But I've met situations with incest.
Yeah.
I've met situations with murders. Even
within families. Yeah.
No, not murders within families. Incest.
I've heard stories of things.
There's a lady who related to me a murder. Well, she didn't witness the murder, but she witnessed the person committed the murder trying to hide the evidence.
Wow.
She and her sister witnessed the person, and the person was close by. I'm on tape, right? Okay. I just was going to be careful as to what to say on tape at this stage, because some of the things that I have experienced and heard lots of interesting stories that have been corroborated by people who don't even know each other.
Right.
And it's...
So there's veracity. Yeah.
Well, not as a fact, but it adds...
No, if they're telling you the same thing.
Yeah, but still you don't want to take that...
Unrelated.
You don't want to necessarily take it as... You don't want to play judge in the situation. But I'm saying you hear different situations about people in public life who you know, reach high levels in society and the kind of things that they have done and to get along the way that you're shocked. And they wonder, you know, but then again it explains how they behave in public life sometimes.